sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest floor as the group of friends trudged through the underbrush. Sarah led the way, her backpack laden with supplies, her heart pounding with excitement. Behind her, Tom and Emily joked and laughed, their voices echoing through the trees. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, and a sense of anticipation hung heavy in the air. They had been planning this trip for weeks, eager to escape the confines of the city and immerse themselves in the wilderness. As they reached the clearing where they would make camp, a shiver ran down Sarah's spine. Despite the warmth of the day, the forest seemed to take on a chill as night approached. She shook off the feeling, chalking it up to nerves, and set to work unpacking the tents. But as darkness descended and the first stars blinked into existence overhead, a sense of unease settled over the group. The crackle of the campfire provided little comfort against the vast expanse of the forest, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Tom noticed her discomfort and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's just your imagination, Sarah," he said, flashing her a grin. "There's nothing out here but us and the trees." But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone in the wilderness. As they settled in for the night, she couldn't help but cast nervous glances into the surrounding darkness, her senses on high alert for any sign of danger lurking in the shadows. Little did they know, their adventure was about to take a terrifying turn, and the true horror of the forest would soon reveal itself in ways they could never have imagined. The forest grew eerily silent as the last rays of sunlight faded into the night. Sarah's hands trembled as she struggled to pitch her tent, her nerves fraying with each passing moment. Emily and Tom worked alongside her, their laughter now replaced by hushed whispers. As the first stars twinkled overhead, casting eerie shadows across the clearing, Sarah's unease deepened. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them from the darkness beyond the trees, lurking just out of sight. With a final tug, Sarah secured the last stake in place and stepped back to survey their handiwork. The tent stood tall and proud against the backdrop of the forest, but instead of providing a sense of security, it seemed to serve as a beacon, drawing attention to their vulnerability. As they gathered around the campfire, the crackling flames provided little solace against the encroaching darkness. The forest seemed to press in on them from all sides, suffocating them with its oppressive silence. Emily glanced nervously at her watch, her eyes widening in alarm. "It's getting late," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "We should get some sleep." But sleep was the furthest thing from Sarah's mind. As she crawled into her sleeping bag and zipped it up tight, every rustle of the wind and snap of a twig outside sent her heart racing. In the darkness of the tent, the shadows seemed to take on a life of their own, twisting and writhing as if possessed by some malevolent force. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, praying for dawn to come and banish the darkness once and for all. But little did she know, the night held far more terror than she could ever have imagined, and the true horrors of the forest were yet to reveal themselves. As darkness descended upon the forest like a suffocating cloak, the crackling campfire provided the only source of light and warmth in the desolate clearing. Emily huddled close to the flames, her eyes darting nervously into the surrounding darkness. The once lively banter among the friends had dwindled to uneasy silence, punctuated only by the occasional snap of a twig or rustle of leaves in the underbrush. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing like a drum in the stillness of the night. Tom attempted to break the tension with a feeble joke, but his words fell flat, swallowed up by the oppressive atmosphere that seemed to press in on them from all sides. The forest seemed alive with unseen eyes, watching their every move with malicious intent. As the fire began to die down, casting long, flickering shadows across the clearing, Sarah's sense of unease reached a fever pitch. Every crackle of the flames sounded like the approach of some unseen predator, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone in the wilderness. With a trembling hand, Sarah reached for a nearby stick and stoked the dying embers of the fire, desperate for its feeble light to ward off the encroaching darkness. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom that hung heavy in the air. As the night stretched on, each passing moment seemed to drag on for an eternity, until Sarah feared she would be consumed by the darkness that surrounded them. Little did she know, the true horrors of the night were yet to reveal themselves, lurking just beyond the edge of their dwindling light. The night wore on, dragging its heavy weight through the forest like a shroud of darkness. Sarah's nerves were on edge as she glanced around the campsite, her senses alert for any sign of danger lurking in the shadows. As the crackling campfire dwindled to a mere whisper of flame, a chill swept through the clearing, sending shivers down Sarah's spine. She wrapped her arms around herself, her breath misting in the cold night air as she scanned the darkness for any sign of movement. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the silence, echoing through the trees like a mournful cry. Sarah's heart leapt into her throat as she whirled around, searching frantically for the source of the sound. "Mark." Emily's voice cut through the darkness, filled with panic and desperation. "Where are you?" But there was no response, only the oppressive silence of the forest closing in around them. With trembling hands, Sarah reached for her flashlight and flicked it on, its feeble beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. As they searched frantically for their missing friend, each shadow seemed to twist and writhe with malevolent intent. Sarah's pulse pounded in her ears as she stumbled through the underbrush, her heart racing with fear. And then, they found it. Mark's tent, abandoned and empty, its flaps flapping in the night breeze like a silent cry for help. With a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach, Sarah reached out and grasped the crumpled note pinned to the fabric. Her hand shook as she read the words scrawled across the page, each letter filled with a sense of impending doom. "I found something," it read, "something in the woods. Don't come looking for me." But it was too late. The forest had claimed another victim, its secrets hidden beneath a veil of darkness that stretched on into infinity. And as Sarah stared into the abyss, she knew that they were not alone, that something sinister lurked just beyond the edge of their dwindling light. Time seemed to warp as the group stood frozen, gripped by a paralyzing fear. Sarah's mind raced with 1,000 questions, each one more terrifying than the last. What had Mark found in the woods? And where had he disappeared to? With a sense of dread settling over them like a suffocating blanket, Sarah took charge, her voice trembling but determined. "We have to find him," she said, her words cutting through the silence like a knife. "We can't leave him out there alone." With a renewed sense of purpose, the group sprang into action, scouring the surrounding forest for any sign of their missing friend. The darkness seemed to press in on them from all sides, each shadow concealing untold horrors. Branches snapped beneath their feet as they pushed deeper into the underbrush, their flashlights cutting through the darkness like beacons of hope. But with each passing moment, the forest seemed to swallow them whole, its secrets buried beneath layers of impenetrable darkness. As they searched, the night seemed to stretch on into eternity, each minute feeling like an eternity as they stumbled blindly through the undergrowth. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she fought to keep her fear at bay. But just as they were about to give up hope, a glimmer of light caught Sarah's eye, illuminating the darkness like a guiding star. With a renewed sense of urgency, she pushed through the underbrush, her heart pounding in her chest as she drew closer to the source of the light. And then, they found him. Mark stood before them, his face pale and drawn, his eyes wide with terror. "I found it," he whispered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I found what's been hiding in the woods." But before Sarah could respond, a deafening roar shattered the silence, echoing through the forest like a thunderclap. With a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach, she realized that they were not alone, that something sinister lurked just beyond the edge of their dwindling light. The forest seemed to hold its breath as the group stood frozen, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest as she stared at Mark, his words hanging in the air like a dark omen. "What did you find?" Emily's voice trembled as she spoke, her eyes wide with apprehension. Mark's gaze flickered to the dense undergrowth surrounding them, his expression unreadable. "There's something out there," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rustle of leaves in the wind. "Something ancient and evil, lurking in the shadows." Sarah's blood ran cold at his words, a chill creeping up her spine as she surveyed their surroundings. The forest seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, each tree concealing untold horrors beneath its gnarled branches. With a sense of dread settling over them like a suffocating blanket, Sarah knew they had to act fast. "We need to find out what's going on," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "We can't let whatever's out there win." With a renewed sense of purpose, the group set out once more, their flashlights cutting through the darkness like swords. But as they ventured deeper into the forest, they realized that they were not alone, that something sinister lurked just beyond the edge of their dwindling light. As they pushed through the underbrush, the air grew thick with the stench of decay, each step bringing them closer to the heart of darkness. And then, they found it. An old, abandoned cabin hidden deep in the woods, its walls weathered and worn with age. With trembling hands, Sarah pushed open the creaking door, her heart pounding in her chest as she stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and cobwebs, the silence broken only by the sound of their ragged breathing. And then, they saw it. A series of strange symbols carved into the walls, their meaning lost to time. As Sarah traced her fingers over the ancient runes, a sense of dread settled over her like a shroud. Whatever had happened here, it was far worse than they could have ever imagined. And as they delved deeper into the cabin's secrets, they realized that the true horror of the forest was yet to reveal itself. The air inside the abandoned cabin was heavy with a palpable sense of dread as the group stood frozen in place, their eyes wide with terror. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she traced her fingers over the ancient symbols etched into the walls, each one radiating a malevolent energy that sent shivers down her spine. "We shouldn't be here," Emily whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "We need to leave, now." But before they could react, a low, guttural growl echoed through the darkness, freezing them in their tracks. Sarah's blood ran cold as she turned to face the source of the sound, her flashlight trembling in her hand. And then, it emerged from the shadows. A twisted, grotesque figure, its features contorted into a snarl of rage and hatred. Its eyes glowed with a sickly green light, piercing through the darkness like daggers. With a primal scream, Sarah stumbled backwards, her heart pounding in her chest as she tried to make sense of the creature before her. It was like something out of a nightmare, a twisted abomination born from the darkest depths of the forest. As the creature lunged forward, its claws slashing through the air with lethal precision, Sarah knew they were in grave danger. With a surge of adrenaline, she pushed Emily and Mark behind her, shielding them from the creature's wrath. But the creature was relentless, its fury unyielding as it bore down on them with savage intensity. Sarah's mind raced as she searched for a way out, her thoughts consumed by a single, desperate urge to survive. And then, in a moment of clarity, she saw it. A glimmer of light shining through the cracks in the cabin's walls, a beacon of hope in the darkness. With renewed determination, she grabbed Emily and Mark's hands and made a mad dash for the door, their footsteps echoing through the cabin like a drumbeat of defiance. As they burst out into the night, the forest seemed to come alive around them, its twisted branches reaching out like gnarled fingers to drag them back into the darkness. But Sarah refused to give up hope, her resolve stronger than ever as she faced the horrors of the night head-on. The forest closed in around them like a living, breathing entity, its twisted branches reaching out like gnarled fingers to drag them back into the darkness. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she led the group through the underbrush, each step a battle against the encroaching shadows. Behind them, the creature's unearthly howls echoed through the night, driving them forward with a primal urgency. Sarah could feel its hot breath on her neck, its presence a constant reminder of the danger that lurked just beyond the edge of their dwindling light. With each passing moment, the forest seemed to grow darker, its secrets closing in around them like a suffocating blanket. But Sarah refused to give up hope, her determination burning brighter than ever as she fought to keep her friends safe. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, they saw it. A glimmer of light shining through the trees, a beacon of hope in the darkness. With a surge of adrenaline, Sarah pushed herself to the limit, her muscles screaming in protest as she propelled herself forward with all her might. As they burst into the clearing, the moon hung low on the horizon, casting an ethereal glow across the landscape. With a sense of relief washing over them like a tidal wave, Sarah collapsed to her knees, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she looked back at the forest they had escaped from. But even as they caught their breath, Sarah knew that their ordeal was far from over. The forest still held its secrets, its darkness concealing untold horrors just beyond the edge of their dwindling light. As they gathered their strength and prepared to continue their journey, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something sinister lurked just beyond the reach of their senses. And as they set off into the night once more, she knew that the true horror of their ordeal was yet to reveal itself. The group huddled together in the safety of the clearing, their breath misting in the cold night air as they tried to make sense of the horrors they had just witnessed. Sarah's mind raced with 1,000 questions, each one more terrifying than the last. "We have to get out of here," Emily said, her voice trembling with fear. "We can't stay in this forest a moment longer." But as they prepared to leave, a sense of unease settled over them like a shroud. The forest seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, its darkness concealing untold horrors just beyond the edge of their dwindling light. With a heavy heart, Sarah knew that their ordeal was far from over. The forest still held its secrets, its darkness a reminder of the terrors that lurked just beyond the reach of their senses. As they set off into the night once more, each step filled with trepidation, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something sinister was following them through the darkness. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, they saw it. A faint glimmer of light shining through the trees, a beacon of hope in the darkness. With a renewed sense of determination, they pushed forward, their footsteps echoing through the forest like a drumbeat of defiance. As they emerged from the darkness and into the safety of the dawn, a sense of relief washed over them like a tidal wave. The forest seemed to sigh in resignation, its secrets hidden once more beneath a veil of darkness. But even as they left the forest behind, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface of the true horrors that lurked within its depths. And as they walked away, she knew that the memory of their ordeal would haunt them for the rest of their days, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of their dwindling light. As the group emerged from the forest, their bodies weary and their minds haunted by the horrors they had witnessed, they found themselves standing on the edge of a desolate road. The first light of dawn cast long shadows across the landscape, illuminating the world in a ghostly hue. With a sense of relief washing over them like a tidal wave, Sarah turned to her friends, a weary smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "We made it," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. "We survived." But even as they celebrated their victory, a sense of unease lingered in the air. The memory of their ordeal weighed heavily on their minds, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of their dwindling light. As they made their way back to civilization, each step a testament to their resilience and strength, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface of the true horrors that lay hidden within the forest. And as they drove away, leaving the forest behind them in a cloud of dust and exhaust, Sarah knew that their ordeal would stay with them forever, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of their dwindling light. But even as they left the forest behind, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what other secrets lay hidden in the darkness, what other horrors lurked just beyond the reach of their senses. And as she looked back one last time, a shiver ran down her spine, a silent warning of the terrors that awaited those who dared to venture into the unknown. As they emerged from the forest, their bodies weary and minds haunted by the horrors they had witnessed, they found themselves on a desolate road. The first light of dawn cast eerie shadows, illuminating the world in a ghostly hue. But even as they celebrated their victory, a sense of unease lingered in the air, a silent warning of the terrors that awaited those who dared to venture into the unknown.